"There will be no more sorting at Hogwarts School," said Voldemort. "There will be no more houses. The emblem, shield, and colors of my noble ancestor, Salazar Slytherin, will suffice for everyone. Won't they, Neville Bottom?" He pointed his wand at Neville, who grew rigid and still, then forced the hat onto Neville's head, so that it slipped down below his eyes. There were movements from the watching crowd in front of the castle, and as one, the Death Eaters raised their wands, holding the fighters of Hogwarts at bay. "Neville here is now going to demonstrate what happens to anyone foolish to continue to oppose me," said Voldemort, and with a flick of his wand he caused the Sorting Hat to burst into flames. Screams split the dawn, and Neville was aflame, rooted to the spot, unable to move, and Harry could not bear it. He must act. And then many things happened at the same moment. They heard uproar from the distant boundary of the school as what sounded like hundreds of people came swarming out over the out-of-sight walls and pelted toward the castle, uttering loud war cries. At the same time, Grawp came lumbering around the side of the castle and yelled, "Haggar!" His cry was answered by roars from Voldemort's giants. They ran at Grawp like bull elephants, making the earth quake. Then came hoofs and the twang of bows, and arrows were suddenly falling amongst the Death Eaters, who broke ranks shouting their surprise. Harry pulled the invisibility cloak from inside his robes, swung it over himself, and sprang to his feet, as Neville moved too. In one swift, fluid motion, Neville broke free from the body-bind curse upon him. The flaming hat fell off him, and he drew from its depths something silver, with a glittering, rubied handle. The slash of the silver blade could not be heard over the roar of the oncoming crowd, or the sounds of the clashing giants, or of the stampeding centaurs, and yet it seemed to draw every eye. With a single stroke, Neville sliced off the great snake's head, which spun high into the air, gleaming in the light flooding from the entrance hall, and Voldemort's mouth was open in a scream of fury that nobody could hear, and the snake's body thudded to the ground at his feet. Hidden beneath the invisibility cloak, Harry cast a shield charm between Neville and Voldemort, before the latter could raise his wand. Then, over the screams and the roars of the thunderous stamps of the battling giants, Hagrid's yell came loudest of all. "Harry!" Hagrid shouted. "Harry! Where's Harry?" Chaos reigned. The charging centaurs were scattering the Death Eaters. Everyone was fleeing the giants' stamping feet, and nearer thundered the reinforcements that had come from who knew where. Harry saw winged creatures soaring around the heads of Voldemort's giants, Thestrals and Buckbeak the Hippogriff, scratching at their eyes, while Grawp punched and pummeled them. And now the wizards, defenders of Hogwarts and Death Eaters alike, were being forced back into the castle. Harry was shooting jinxes at curses at any Death Eater he could see, and they crumpled, not knowing what or who had hit them, and their bodies were trampled by the retreating crowd. Still hidden beneath the invisibility cloak, Harry was buffeted into the entrance hall. He was searching for Voldemort, and saw him across the room, firing spells from his wand as he backed into the great hall, still screaming instructions to his followers as he sent curses flying left and right. Harry cast more shield charms, and Voldemort's would-be victims, Seamus Finnegan and Hannah Abbott, darted past him into the great hall, where they joined the fight already flourishing inside it. And now there were more, even more people storming up the front steps, and Harry saw Charlie Weasley overtaking Horace Slughorn, who was still wearing his emerald pajamas. They seemed to have returned at the head of what looked like the families and friends of every Hogwarts student who had remained to fight, along with shopkeepers and homeowners of Hogsmeade. The centaurs Bane, Ronan, and Megorian burst into the hall with a great clatter of hoofs, as behind Harry the door that led to the kitchens was blasted off its hinges. The house elves of Hogwarts swarmed into the entrance hall, screaming and waving carved knives and cleavers, and at their head, the locket of Regulus Black bouncing off his chest, was Kreacher, his bullfrog's voice audible even above this din. "Fight! Fight! Fight for my master, defender of the house elves! Fight the Dark Lord, in the name of brave Regulus! Fight!" They were hacking and stabbing at the ankles and shins of Death Eaters, their tiny faces alive with malice. And everywhere Harry looked Death Eaters, and everywhere Harry looked, Death Eaters were folding under sheer weight of numbers, overcome by spells, dragging arrows from wounds stabbed in the legs by elves, or simply attempting to escape, but swallowed by the oncoming horde. But it was not over yet. Harry sped between duelers, past struggling prisoners, and into the great hall. Voldemort was in the center of the battle, and he was striking and smiting all within reach. Harry could not get a clear shot, but fought his way nearer, still invisible, and the great hall became more and more crowded, as everyone who could walk forced their way inside. Harry saw Yaxley slammed to the floor by George and Lee Jordan, saw Dolohov fall with a scream at Flitwick's hands, saw Walden McNair thrown across the room by Hagrid, hit the stone wall opposite, and slide unconscious to the ground. He saw Ron and Neville bringing down Fenrir Greyback, Aberforth stunning Rookwood, Arthur and Percy flooring Thickness, and Lucius and Narcissa Malfoy running through the crowd, not even attempting to fight, screaming for their son. Voldemort was now dueling McGonagall, Slughorn, and Kingsley all at once, and there was a cold hatred in his face as they wove and ducked around him, unable to finish him. Bellatrix was still fighting too, 50 yards away from Voldemort, and like her master, she dueled 3 at once. Hermione, Ginny, and Luna, all battling their hardest, but Bellatrix was equal to them, and Harry's attention was diverted as a killing curse shot so close to Ginny that she missed death by an inch. He changed course, running at Bellatrix rather than Voldemort, but before he had gone a few steps he was knocked sideways. "Not my daughter, you bitch!" Mrs. Weasley threw off her cloak as she ran, freeing her arms. Bellatrix spun on the spot, roaring with laughter at the sight of her new challenger. "Out of my way!" shouted Mrs. Weasley to the 3 girls, and with a swipe of her wand she began to duel. Harry watched with terror and elation as Molly Weasley's wand slashed and twirled, and Bellatrix Lestrange's smile faltered and became a snarl. Jets of light flew from both wands. The floor around the witch's feet became hot and cracked. Both women were fighting to kill. "No!" Mrs. Weasley cried as a few students ran forward, trying to come to her aid. "Get back! Get back! She is mine!" Hundreds of people now lined the walls, watching the 2 fights, Voldemort and his 3 opponents, Bellatrix and Molly, and Harry stood invisible, torn between both, wanting to attack and yet to protect, unable to be sure that he could not be hit by the innocent, that he would not hit the innocent. "What will happen to your children when I kill you?" taunted Bellatrix, as mad as her master, capering as Molly's curses danced around her. "When Mummy's gone the same way as Freddy." "You will never touch our children again!" screamed Mrs. Weasley. Bellatrix laughed, the same exhilarated laugh her cousin Sirius had given as he toppled backward through the veil. And suddenly Harry knew what was going to happen before it did. Molly's curse soared beneath Bellatrix's outstretched arm and hit her squarely in the chest, directly over her heart. Bellatrix's gloating smile froze, her eyes seemed to bulge. For the tiniest space of time she knew what had happened, and then she toppled, and the watching crowd roared, and Voldemort screamed. Harry felt as though he turned in slow motion. He saw McGonagall, Kingsley, and Slughorn blasted backward, flailing and riding through the air, as Voldemort's fury at the fall of his last best lieutenant exploded with the force of a bomb. Voldemort raised his wand and directed him at Molly Weasley. "Protego!" roared Harry, and the shield charm expanded in the middle of the hall, and Voldemort stared around for the source as Harry pulled off the invisibility cloak at last. The yellow shock, the cheers, the screams on every side of "Harry, he's alive!" were stifled at once. The crowd was afraid, and silence fell abruptly and completely as Voldemort and Harry looked at each other and began, at the same moment, to circle each other. "I don't want anyone else to try to help," Harry said loudly, and in the total silence his voice carried like a trumpet call. "It's got to be like this. It's got to be me." Voldemort hissed. "Potter doesn't mean that," he said, his red eyes wide. "That isn't how he works, is it? Who are you going to use as a shield today, Potter?" Nobody, said Harry simply. There are no more Horcruxes. It's just you and me. Neither can live while the other survives, and one of us is about to leave for good. One of us? Jeered Voldemort, and his whole body was taut and his red eyes stared a snake that was about to strike. You think it will be you, do you? The boy who has survived by accident, and because Dumbledore is pulling the strings? Accident, was it, when my mother died to save me? Asked Harry. They were still moving sideways, both of them, in that perfect circle, maintaining the same distance from each other, and for Harry, no face existed but Voldemort's. Accident? When I decided to fight in that graveyard? Accident that I didn't defend myself tonight, and still survived, and returned to fight again. Accidents! Screamed Voldemort, but he still did not strike, and the watching crowd was frozen as if petrified, and of the hundreds in the hall, nobody seemed to breathe but they two. Accident and chance, and the fact that you crouched and sniveled beneath the skirts of greater men and women, and permitted me to kill them for you. You won't be killing anyone else tonight, Harry, as they circled, and stared into each other's eyes, green into red. You won't be able to kill any of them ever again. Don't you get it? I was ready to die to stop you from hurting these people. But you did not! I meant to, and that's what I did. I've done what my mother did. They're protected from you. Haven't you noticed how none of the spells you put on them are binding? You can't torture them. You can't touch them. You don't learn from your mistakes, Riddle, do you? You dare! Yes, I dare, said Harry. I know things you don't know, Tom Riddle. I know lots of important things that you don't. Want to hear some before you make another big mistake? Voldemort did not speak, but prowled in a circle, and Harry knew that he kept him temporarily mesmerized in that bay, held back by the faintest possibility that Harry might indeed know a final secret. Is it love again? Said Voldemort, his snake's face jeering. Dumbledore's favorite solution, love, which he claimed conquered death, though love did not stop him from falling from the tower and breaking like an old waxwork. Love, which did not prevent me from stamping out your mudblood mother like a cockroach, Potter, and nobody seems to love you enough to run forward this time and take my curse. So what will stop you from dying now when I strike? Just one thing, said Harry, and they circled each other, wrapped in each other, held apart by nothing but the last secret. If it is not love that will save you this time, said Voldemort, you must believe that you have magic that I do not, or else a weapon more powerful than mine. I believe both, said Harry, and he saw a shock flit across his snake-like face, though it was instantly dispelled. Voldemort began to laugh, and the sound was more frightening than his screams. Humorless and insane, it echoed around the silent hall. You think you know more magic than I, he said. Then I, great Lord Voldemort, who has performed magic that Dumbledore himself never dreamed of. Oh, he dreamed of it, said Harry, but he knew more than you, knew enough not to do what you've done. You mean he was weak, screamed Voldemort. Too weak to dare, too weak to take what might have been his, what will be mine. No, he was cleverer than you, said Harry. A better wizard, a better man. I brought about the death of Albus Dumbledore. You thought you did, said Harry, but you were wrong. For the first time, the watching crowd stirred as the hundreds of people around the walls drew breath as one. Dumbledore is dead! Voldemort hurled the words at Harry, as though they would cause him unendurable pain. His body decays in the marble tomb in the grounds of this castle. I have seen it, Potter, and he will not return. Yes, Dumbledore's dead, said Harry calmly, but you didn't have him killed. He chose his own manner of dying, chose it months before he died, arranged the whole thing with the man you thought was your servant. What childish dream is this? Said Voldemort, but he still did not strike, and his red eyes did not waver from Harry's. Severus Snape wasn't yours, said Harry. Snape was Dumbledore's. Dumbledore's from the moment you started hunting down my mother, and you never realized it, because of the thing you can't understand. You never saw Snape cast a Patronus, did you, Riddle? Voldemort did not answer. They continued to circle each other like wolves about to tear each other apart.